The New York Giants fell to the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving 27-20. Their losing streak extending to 7 straight games this season. We have the takeaways for you coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And I hope everybody had a very happy Thanksgiving, despite the fact that the Giants didn't quite give us what we were all hoping for. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to talk about all that and then some. And this episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, folks. On today's show, again, we're going to talk about the dud down in Dallas. The Giants basically handing the Cowboys their first win at home this season. The extended losing streak to 7 games. The Giants have lost to the Cowboys the last 8 games. The Giants are now officially the first team to be eliminated from the postseason. Not that they had a chance this year, given how the season was going. The Giants, the first team to have double-digit losses this season. It's just really, really bad. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then in segment 2, the cries for a change at the top continue to intensify. I'm going to try and weigh in on it with a level head. All right. I'm going to put emotion aside and look at things rationally in segment 2. And then in segment 3, I want to talk a little bit about Malik Nabers, who had some interesting stuff to say after the game. And I think, some of what he had to say might have been misconstrued a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about that in segment 3. So again, welcome on into the podcast. All right, folks, we have another loss. I mean, this should be routine by now. I should be on autopilot, it seems, for talking about this team. But here are some things that really, stuck in my craw about this Giants team. The first thing is the penalties. I mean, we talk about football. We talk usually about the fundamentals. We talk about discipline. We talk about, paying attention to the little details. And week after week after week, this team just doesn't do it. And it's getting to be old and it's getting to be frustrating. It's just, every play you can point to somebody screwing up and just, sabotaging just about every play out there. So this week, for example, the Giants not only had the 2 turnovers, which resulted in 14 points for the Cowboys, but here's an amazing stat. The Giants had a season-high 13 penalties, and they had exactly 4 more first downs all game. So it was 13 penalties, 17 first downs. That just blows my mind. It really blows my mind because, look, I do now over on New York Giants on SI, I do a kind of a scouting report on the officiating crews that are assigned to work the Giants game. So I knew this one coming in was going to be a little bit on the flag happy side, but I never, ever thought the Giants would draw 13 penalties, and it just seemed like every time they had a stop or a big play, boom, a penalty came and wiped it out. And you're not going to win if you keep doing that. So that to me was a huge, huge problem for the Giants. And, people will say, well, where does that come from? Is it the head coach? Is it, the players? It's a combination. I mean, a coach, he can only do so much. He can only say so much regarding, the Giants and, hey, we got to play better. We got to do this better. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's everybody. It's everybody. How are they being coached? Are they being coached to be grabby, for example? that they're drawing all this pass interference? Are they being taught not to look behind them when the ball is in flight? Are they taught properly how to tackle, which is a whole nother topic? I mean, I just don't know the answer because, we don't see the practices and we don't get to see what's being taught in the classrooms. And, speaking of tackling, the Giants had 10 missed tackles at least 10, I should say, in the first half alone. Folks, I mean, we are in what, week 13 of the NFL season now? Tackling is one of the most fundamental skills in football. Players learn it in the pee-wee level, at the pee-wee level, okay? How is it that they are just not able to wrap up and tackle? How is it that they continue to take bad angles or don't have proper run fits? Is it the scheme, which I suspect is part of it? Yeah, but the tackling itself, if you're in a position to make a tackle, how are you not wrapping up? And again, I don't know if they work on tackling drills during practice. All I know is that it's week 13 and this team's tackling has been atrocious all season long. And it's a big reason why you see teams like Dallas, who had a poor running game to start with, come in and now all of a sudden they look like, the next great rushing team. So the little things, and that's on the players, that's on the coaching staff. There's just so much blame to go around here that I don't think you can point to one guy or one area. This is, you win as a team, you lose as a team. And right now, I'm just not sure, where they're falling short in their preparation. They tell us that they have a great week of practice. And again, we don't get to see it. We only get to see like the first 20 minutes or so, which is basically individuals and warm-ups. So we have to take their word for it. But then come game day, you see the missed tackles, you see the turnovers, you see the drop passes, you see all the little things that pop up. The Giants I think they had at least 3 or 4 drop passes, 2 of which were from Malik Nabers, who we're going to talk about a little later on in the program. And you just start to wonder. You really do. And, I said on X last night, I said, despite everything, get a decent quarterback in here, number one. Beef up the defensive line because the defensive line depth has been a problem all year long. And quite honestly, now, Dexter Lawrence suffered a dislocated elbow. Is he maybe done for the year? I don't know, but I'd be willing to bet he's probably not going to play the next game if he's got a dislocated elbow. All right. Get cornerback help because, they just don't have enough there. Maybe then they get back on track. Maybe, change the defensive coordinator because I still say, after watching the season, Shane Bowen's system does not fit the personnel that they kept and carried over, which is a problem. So, I don't know, folks. I mean, it's frustrating to watch. And I know you guys are frustrated. I'm frustrated too. I'm trying to keep a level head about things and not let emotion get in the way. Because when that happens, it's not good for anybody. That's what I try to do. Now, you guys, I get it. You're understandably unhappy. You deserve better. I've said that right from the get-go. You deserve better than what we have seen from this Giants team. And I just don't have any more words of comfort for you guys. I really don't. I wish I did. But this team is what it is. And right now, it's a bad football team across the board. Across the board. So, all right, coming up next, because this is such a bad football team, is it time for some radical changes? And I'm talking at head coach and GM. And we'll discuss that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking for those hard-to-get tickets to shows, concerts, and sporting events, look no further than to Game Time. Game Time makes finding the tickets you want faster and easier than ever and offers seats at competitive prices. I've used Game Time in the past to catch area concerts, and I've simply been amazed at the offerings and the competitive pricing that they have. Game Time takes the guesswork out of ticket buying so that you're left with the seats you want at reasonable prices. You'll get clear images of your seat views, and you'll also get event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and get the tickets that you want. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up next week, I'm going to have, I believe, Mike Jones of The Athletic will be on with me. Obviously, we'll have a crossover Thursday. The Giants will host the Saints next week. So I'm actually looking forward to the crossover Thursday because my sweetheart of a guy, Ross Jackson, is going to be on with me. Ross is just so awesome. Truly enjoy Ross and his takes. So he'll be on with me and just keep on bringing you updates and, thoughts about the team and where things are going. So speaking of thoughts about the team, it's a time for the Giants to make a change. Now, we all know that John Mara, one half of ownership, said back in October that he didn't anticipate making a change at head coach or GM during the season. And he, didn't think he would do so after the season. And this is when the season started to go off the rails, actually, for the Giants. This the start of the slide. Hard to believe that the last time the Giants won was, I think, October 5th against the Seahawks. So it's been over 2 months. So anyway, should the Giants make a change? The only change that I will advocate for is a defensive coordinator. And at this point, if they want to win games, maybe Bowen just isn't the answer right now. I mean, I said it before. I don't think the personnel that he has and that he inherited necessarily fits what he wants to do. So I just think that, they have to go back to the drawing board on the defensive coordinator side of things because, if you remember, the Giants went through multiple candidates for the defensive coordinator in an effort to get it right. And look, I've said before, I think Shane Bowen can be a good defensive coordinator. He's just not a fit for what the Giants have and what they want to do. And I pointed to a couple of examples. I pointed to Deonte Banks, who looked promising in man press coverage, but who looks absolutely lost in zone coverage. Bobby Okereke was a tackling machine. He hasn't really been, has made as much of an impact as as he did last year. So there are little tiny examples of that with run fits, with the scheme, just little things that just as they add up week after week after week, convince me further that Shane Bowen's not a fit for this defense. So, if the Giants are going to make any kind of change before the end of the season, I could see that being it. And I'm not a big fan of, advocating, firing people in season, but something's got to be done. Now, what about the head coach and the general manager? I know there are a lot of you out there who are angry that want to see changes, but folks, let's take a deep breath here. If you start all over again with a new GM, you're basically scrapping all the stuff you put together and you're starting from scratch. And you're probably saying, well, look, they've been lousy the last 2 years, so why not start from scratch? As I've said many times, folks, when you bring in a new head coach and GM, they want their guys in there, which means some of the other guys that are decent get jettisoned, right? So you got to be careful with that. Joe Schoen, I know he's made mistakes. I acknowledge he's made mistakes. And I don't have to go over the mistakes. You all know what they are. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by telling you, oh, we did this wrong, you did that wrong. But that said, look at the foundation that he's starting to put into place. There's some good young talent on this team. Dexter, Andrew Thomas, Malik Nabers, Tyler Nubin. Yes, even Deonte Banks, if he gets into a system or he gets a defensive coordinator who maybe utilizes him properly. Okereke is still very good. Kayvon Thibodeau can be good. Brian Burns, Tyrone Tracy, um, Wandale Robinson is not bad. He's part of the future. They've got a core, and I just would hate to see a new GM come in and say, nah, we're going to just tear this whole core down and start again. Every time you do that, you start all over. And look, GMs, if you look at the history with the Giants, most of their GMs get at least 4 years. Dave Gettleman got 4. Jerry Reese got over a decade. Ernie Accorsi got over a decade. George Young got 2 decades, I think, or close to 2 decades. Going back to the 70s, I think Andy Robustelli got 5 years. I don't think the Giants are going to dump Joe Schoen after 3 seasons. I think they're going to continue to let him build the team up, manage the salary cap. The salary cap should be a little bit better next year now that, the Daniel Jones contract is coming off the books. At least the salary part of it, the dead money is still going to hit the books. The cap's going to go up. The Giants, right now, it looks like they're going to have a top 5 draft pick. I think right now they're sitting at number 1 in the order. I don't know if they'll finish there, but they're going to be in the top 5, it looks like. So you just got to let Joe continue to build this team up, and yeah, did he make mistakes? People will point to the Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney mistakes. I don't know that necessarily, that those were mistakes, because I asked myself, would Saquon have had the type of year he's having now with this Giants offensive line? Probably not. Would Xavier McKinney have excelled in this defense? I don't know. We'll never know, obviously. But, I understand what Joe was trying to do there and not wanting to devote a large chunk of change on positions that he felt that maybe he could fill in the draft. And look, is anybody out there really unhappy with Tyrone Tracy other than maybe for the fumbles that he has? So, I think you got to let it play out a little bit. Now let's talk about Brian Daboll, because Daboll is getting a lot of heat, and justifiably so, because he is the head coach and he's in charge of the whole operation, kind of what we see on the football field. Brian Daboll, to his credit, got this team to play hard against Dallas. They played okay against Tampa Bay, but not as hard, I think, as maybe they could have. And I wondered if maybe frustration set in, which, caused players to lash out and, after the game and talk about, playing soft, which is different from being soft, by the way. Playing soft is one thing. Being soft is another. But with Brian Daboll, look, the offense that he runs can be productive. We saw it in Buffalo. I still say that, get a long-term answer at quarterback in here that fits what you want to do, that is capable of doing what you want to do on a consistent basis. And what that is being able to make quick decisions, throw the ball deep, have a little bit of mobility, to execute design runs, RPOs and all that stuff. And just maybe the offense looks a little bit better. And look, one of the reasons why the Giants hired Brian Daboll, if you remember, was because of the work he did up in Buffalo, was because of the work he did with Josh Allen. So I don't know, folks, to me, to pull the plug on Brian Daboll at this point, I think you give him another year or two. You let him get the quarterback that he feels he can win with, and you let him work with that guy. And if after, a year or two, it's not working, you go in a different direction. Because as I've said many times to you guys, the ideal scenario in rebuilding a team is to sweep out the quarterback, the GM, and the head coach in one swoop. Giants are not going to do that. They had their chance to do that when Tom Coughlin left, and they didn't. They're not going to do it now. I'm fairly certain that's going to be the case. So For those of you who want sweeping changes, I don't know how true that's going to be or how much that's going to happen, which I suspect is going to, further anger and disappoint a lot of you. But, this season, it's a lost cause. We know that. They were on their they were on their third quarterback, similar to last year, except the circumstances were a little different. Last year was injury related. This year, a combination of performance and injury. The defense still struggling. There have to be fixes. And I know some of you have said, well, Pat, how many coaches can Brian Daboll fire? You know what? As many as it takes to get it right. It's easier I think, to replace a coordinator than it is to just start all over with building a brand new staff. And that's something else you have to take into consideration because, sometimes it can take a couple months to build up a staff. And meanwhile, the scouts are out doing their thing and, trying to fit the players or find players that fit what the coaches want. And if you don't have all the coaches in place, then, it can be disastrous. So I don't think, bottom line, I don't think the Giants are at a point, and I know some of you are going to say I'm crazy for saying this, but I think you give Daboll and Schoen at least another year or two. Get the quarterback situation resolved, see what happens. If it doesn't get resolved, then you start to think about really making a change. So that's my take at any rate. All right, coming up next, Malik Nabers had something interesting to say after the game. I'll tell you what his comments were, and I'll tell you why I don't think they mean what it sounds like they meant. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. Feel that Brian Daboll is going to be the next head coach fired? Or is it going to be Chicago's Matt Alvarez being fired? Place your bet. I'm sure there's a prop for that on FanDuel. So go on, visit FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And I want to talk about Malik Nabers' post-game comments after the Dallas loss. Now, Malik Nabers, going back to the Tampa Bay game, he complained about not getting the ball. He got the ball 13 times. I think he caught 8 of his pass targets, but he also had at least 2 drop passes. And I think now he has something like 7 or 8 on the year, which I believe leads all rookie receivers from this year's draft class. Now, you don't want to see drops in any scenario, especially when they come on third down. But Malik Nabers, after the game, said something to the effect, and I'm going to paraphrase here since I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he said something to the effect of, I don't care about drops, just keep throwing me the ball. And right away, some people were like, will you listen to this kid? How arrogant can he be? He doesn't care about drops. All he wants is the ball. He's selfish. He's immature. He's this, he's that. Folks, I didn't take it that way. All right. Now, what I think Malik Nabers meant by that, and obviously I'd like to, ask him about it. I was not at the game down in Dallas, but I would certainly be interested in seeing if my theory is correct here. Sometimes when a receiver drops a ball or makes a mistake, it can wreak havoc with his confidence. And I think what Malik Nabers was saying, look, I'm not going to let drops define my game. Just keep throwing me the ball and I'll make plays for you. And we've seen, some of the best receivers in the game drop passes here and there. It happens. Okay, we saw it a few weeks ago when DK Metcalf dropped some passes. In the Dallas game, CeeDee Lamb had a drop. Good receivers will drop passes just as bad receivers will drop passes. just that bad receivers tend to drop them a little bit more. So again, what I think Malik Nabers was getting at was that the drops are not going to define my game. They're not going to ruin my confidence. Just keep throwing me the ball and I will do my part to make this work for you. That's what I think he meant. Now, could he have maybe said it a little bit better? Perhaps. Could he have said, look, the drops, bother me. I'm going to work on them, but they don't define my game, Yeah, that would have certainly left no doubt as to what he was actually thinking. So I think the only thing I would say about Malik Nabers is, he's 21 years old and he's got a lot of bravado to him, which is what endears him so much to the Giants franchise. And it's not a bad thing. You want guys that have that swagger and that attitude, that dog mentality, as they call it. I just think as he gets older, maybe he'll learn to phrase things a little differently so that they don't get misconstrued. Because I did, looking at the internet, looking at X today, a lot of people were roasting Malik Nabers for those comments. I don't think that's what he was trying to do. I don't think he was trying to be dismissive of the drops. But, people are going to think what they want to think, which they're entitled to. Everybody's welcome to an opinion, including me. And, it is what it is. And remember, we got to look at Malik Nabers on Hard Knocks and how we talked about how he hates losing, how he wants the ball. Would you rather the Giants have a guy on the roster who says, we lost, so, it is what it is? Would you rather have a guy who says, I don't really want the ball, I just want my paycheck? I think I would want somebody who would want to contribute. And if he makes a mistake here and there, it's not, who amongst us is perfect? I mean, the Giants, they've got bigger problems, I think, than Malik Nabers right now. So for one, I don't think I'm going to, roast the guy because he made that comment. Now, if he meant it in a different way and that comes out, that's a different story. But again, I think it was all a confidence type of deal. I'm not going to be defined by my drop passes. Keep on throwing me the ball. I'll do my part. So that's where we're at, Giant fans. We closed the week out with a loss. It is what it is. Things are not going to they're going to get worse before they get better. We'll keep on bringing you coverage of the Giants. Obviously, if anything happens over the weekend, Brian Daboll is scheduled to speak at noon. As I record, this is about 10:30 on a Friday morning, day after Thanksgiving. If something breaks, I'll come back on with an emergency podcast. If not, I'll see you on Monday. Hope you have a great weekend. And thanks again for making the Locked On Giants podcast part of your day.